Hi Jen, thanks so much for being with us again today. Can you talk us through how circular procurement comes into your line of work?
So there are two main opportunities to influence the circular outcomes on those jobs. The first opportunity we have is through our specifications, so making sure that our specifications accommodate products with recycled content, making sure there are no barriers to the use of those products, and making sure there are clear approval pathways for designers and builders wanting to use those products. The second is really the procurement tools that we have available to us to influence the outcomes. We've also introduced a sustainability specification which works alongside those technical specs and actually asks the designers to look at alternative materials that have lower life cycle impacts than the traditional materials.
How do you make sure to lift the different barriers, and what are some of the barriers that have been in the specification world that you've had to work on?
Well, for example, with our pavement materials specifications, a lot of those specifications would have been written up a long time ago, perhaps before some of the more innovative pavement options are available, like pavements incorporating recycled plastics or crumb rubber. So going back and looking at whether there are any performance requirements or timeframes that make it difficult for suppliers to offer those sorts of products.
So this obviously isn't just a challenge for South Australia, right? How do you work with the rest of the country on this?
Well, the department's a member of Austroads, so Austroads provides services to all of the road and transport infrastructure agencies across Australia, so we can coordinate efforts and jointly create model specifications that each agency can take up.
All agencies across Australia are actually working together on this with Austroads. The second thing you mentioned was procurement tools. Can you give us some more examples of how important that is in your role?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really important to get good circular outcomes to follow through all the way through from the very start at acquisition planning right through to contract management. So I guess the very first point in the process is pre-qualification. So the department that I'm with has a pre-qualification system for a lot of suppliers. If you use the example of asphalt suppliers, they have to meet minimum requirements in terms of quality management, insurance, all those traditional areas that they'd need to demonstrate their capability in, including additional requirements around sustainability, or their capacity to include recycled materials is an option to get better outcomes. We're able to include in our pre-qualification systems a requirement for all suppliers wishing to supply to the department to have a sustainability rating as a pass-fail requirement, and then to request that asphalt plant assessment score in the tender evaluation and assign a weighting to it. So that really motivates the supplier to improve their plant efficiency and processes, because they know that they'll be rewarded for that in terms of a better score in their tender evaluation and the chance to win more work.
And as a government agency, you can actually plug into industry schemes to complement what you're doing as well. That's great. What's one example of something that an individual can do to actually influence outcomes around circularity?
I think, in my experience, you're not going to get good circular procurement outcomes unless all of the people involved in the procurement journey are on board and are pushing in the same direction. So that means the people in the acquisition planning stage working out what the objectives are, what opportunities there are to get better outcomes in that procurement, right through to the tender evaluation team, so people making sure that sustainability criteria are in the evaluation plan and that the suppliers are being assessed on those criteria. And again through to contract management, following up on the commitments made in the bid and ensuring that any KPIs are tracked effectively.
Can you talk us through the link between circular and net zero?
Yeah, absolutely. So the government has a net zero target for the state as a whole, as well as for government operations, and each department is really tasked with looking at how they can reduce their carbon footprint. I'm looking at what materials we can procure that have a lower carbon footprint, and it turns out that many materials with a low carbon footprint also have high recycled content.
Thanks Jen for your time today and sharing what the Department of Infrastructure and Transport's been up to in circular procurement. I'm sure that was useful for many of you in your work as well. Thanks for listening.